I'm doing a little braiding.
What a lovely gift, Silver. Wait for us.
Okay. Ugh. Sorry. I'm a little nervous. So, come on, snacky snacks. My glasses are always crooked. Always makes me feel like my head's crooked. Fuck. Always, what the glasses are crooked. And I'm a turbo nerd. My glasses are crooked. My nail polish is chipped. Overbite. I'm classic. Classic nerd. I read. I read. I really shouldn't press record until I'm ready to start reading. Follow me as I progress. I shall get better. Practice makes perfect. We ended at his lips caressed her neck, then moved lower to sweep across her cleavage, coquettishly displayed in the sweetheart cut of her velvet gown's neckline. Julian, I think you'd better slow down. As politely as possible, Eve tried to separate the lower half of her body from the hard evidence of his arousal. Julian didn't react well to Eve's resistance. He brought his head up to face her, and for a moment, a glittering chill flashed over his features. But then he blinked and the look was gone. I think you need to relax, he purred as he dipped 2 fingers into his blazer's breast pocket, then pulled something out. This should help. What is it? She asked, eyeing the strange oblong pill. Just a little downer, a lude. I don't do drugs. It's not drugs. Good Lord, it's just a little pill to help you feel better. My mother takes such things, for heaven's sake, though her doctor calls them Seconal. I don't know, Julian. You know, maybe I was wrong about you, Eve. I shouldn't have brought you here. A pity, since you haven't seen the sub-basement yet or met any real celebs like Stevie and Donna and— Wait! Eve exclaimed, as he began to pull her toward the door. I didn't say I wanted to go, but you're way too uptight to meet anyone. You've got to relax, insisted Julian, presenting the pill again. Annoyed, Eve snatched it from his hands and gulped it down, chasing it with the rest of her champagne. Good girl, Julian murmured in her ear after pulling her body against his again. You know, I've told our pilot to keep the plane ready. In a few hours, my darling, I'm whisking you away to Bermuda. What? That's right, Julian went on. Eve tried to pull away again, but he held her firmly in his arms. No need for us to make love in this wretched winter cold. When I take you, my dear, and I intend to take you over and over again, it will be on a tropical breeze. No, Julian, you're moving too fast. But the lights were swirling around her now as she slowly felt her anxieties falling away. The little pill was changing her world, and her mind was riding the wave. This is what you wanted, wasn't it? Whispered a voice inside her mind. Or was it Julian's voice in her ear? Something different, something wild. Stop being such a little girl. Don't be afraid. Just let go. The pounding throb of the disco became a part of her pulse, the mirrored ball above a hypnotic jewel. Suddenly, she began to think that maybe the voice was right. Yes, she murmured in Julian's ear. Perhaps a tropical breeze would be heavenly at this time of year. She didn't even feel the need to protest when Juliet backed her against the wall and tugged her velvet gown high above her bare thighs. That's right, my dear. Open your legs for me, coaxed Julian as he pressed himself into her. Yes, darling, the party's just beginning. Oh my God, that's pepperoni. Oh man, that was inappropriate. I'm reading Chapter 4, Alistair. The next morning was exceptionally bitter on Harmony's Raven Hill, even for the middle of a New England February. But Alistair Crane thought the cold invigorating. As was his usual practice, he rose from his warm bed with the dawn. By 9, he'd completed his Tai Chi, skimmed the Journal, Globe, and Times, and had already taken 2 conference calls with his new associates in Asia. Sitting in his richly paneled study, Alistair was never more aware of his family's history and never more proud of its accomplishments. More than 3 centuries earlier, this mansion was nothing but a rustic New England cabin. With the passing decades, however, the Cranes had amassed a fortune that allowed them to add room upon room, and then wing upon wing, until it resembled an American palace. By the late 1800s, the sprawling estate boasted riding stables and a comfortably furnished guest house. By the 1940s, the Cranes had added tennis courts and a 10-car garage. And by the 1960s, a sauna and whirlpool were installed along with a luxurious indoor-outdoor pool, heated to an agreeable 82 degrees in summer and winter. The surrounding property had also grown with time, like sharp-eyed predators who understood when to strike at weak prey. The Cranes always found a way to take over the land of their Harmony neighbors, often the very day that promissory notes became overdue. Alistair was well aware that Harmony's residents began to dread each new generation of Cranes. But that was not a bad thing to Alistair. Fear brings respect. His father had taught him, and respect bolsters power. In these modern times of the 1970s, Alistair knew the Cranes had achieved a level of wealth far beyond any family in the surrounding region. He himself had acquired for his family a private jet, and for Crane Industries, two skyscrapers in Boston. But Alistair learned a very important lesson from his late father, a lesson that he would soon impart to his own son, Julian. As time marched on, it took with it the stability of any given industry, and thus the security of any family's fortunes. Alistair could still hear his father's deep, booming voice vibrating through his being. For 300 years since we came to this country, for 300 years since we came to this country, none of we Cranes have ever taken our security for granted. It is up to you, my boy, to carry on our traditions, grow the business, son, any way you can. And Alistair had. Crane Industries, which dealt in shipping, fishing, tourism, and various other commercial entities, had already expanded from regional to national. And as the current patriarch of the family, Alistair had now set a new personal goal to see Crane Industries go global. These near dawn conference calls with Asia each morning were the start of that very process. Alistair was on his second cup of tea and about to begin his third conference call when the phone rang for him first. Oh, God. Good morning, Mr. Crane, sir. Go ahead. He took the small jet at midnight from Boston to LA Guardia. Then he flew to Bermuda at dawn. Bermuda? Whatever for. To impress a woman, sir. One of color, I might add. Alistair paused a long moment. I see, he finally replied tightly. He's checked into one of the Crane resorts with her. Hotel Tropic, the bridal suite. Bridal suite? My God, they're not. No, sir. Not married. Your manager told me it's presidential class, best in the resort. The one honeymooners usually take. But Julian didn't get married to the girl. He just wanted to. Yes, I get the picture. Keep an eye on him then and continue your daily reports. Alistair is keeping tabs on his son. I felt like I had to say that, being that I fucked up so much in this chapter so far. Whew. Entering the breakfast room, Catherine Crane stared in silence at her husband. What, Catherine, what? Is it really necessary for you to spy on your own son? Every generation of Cranes must be protected, Catherine. You have no idea how many gold diggers would love nothing more than contaminate our line with a little blackmailing bastard. Catherine sighed at the harshness of her husband's words, the steely determination in his eyes. A shiver touched her skin despite the crackling fire in the nearby hearth. Her years with Alistair had given her many worldly benefits. Trips to Europe, balls at the White House, movie premieres with Hollywood stars, but with the passing decade, she had become increasingly less impressed with such things. Catherine hated the idea of saying they bored her, because at first it had all seemed so beguiling, so incredibly glamorous, but the truth was she was tired now. Too tired to even think about 8-hour flights to Paris or even short hops to Broadway for opening night orchestra seats. And she'd been married too long to a man who treated his personal relationships as little more than business transactions with estimated gains and losses resulting from a series of implemented strategies. Catherine observed her husband. His forceful features were still sharp, his aristocratic profile as powerful as his steady gaze. He was, it seemed to her, as handsome in these middle-aged years as he'd been in his 20s when she'd first laid eyes on him, when she'd first fallen in love with him. Of course, he was more distinguished looking now, with his hair graying at the temples and the edges of his eyes displaying subtle signs of a crow's feet, tiny wrinkles that only added an air of rugged character to his face. Catherine loved Alistair still, but she knew now, with his ever-present remoteness, how much that love had cost her and would continue to. He had been a generous man over the years, generous with money and lavish gifts, but never with himself. And Catherine had eventually learned that even his gifts came at a price. Total and complete control. Sheridan had become Catherine's only true joy now, the only reason to rise in the morning. For a short time, she had felt like that with Julian when he was very little. But Catherine hadn't understood Alistair's plan to twist Julian until it was too late. These past few years, especially, Catherine saw that Julian had truly become Alistair's boy, a Crane, body and soul. Perhaps a trace of herself was left in him, but no more than a trace, and the truth was, Catherine knew she had not worked hard enough to make that difference in her son's life. She wasn't proud of her weakness, that she'd never been able to fight her husband's will. What hurt the most was the knowledge that Rachel surely would have. Even years ago, Catherine's spirited older sister had known exactly how to manipulate Alistair. But then Alistair had fallen head over heels for Rachel. She had been his first love, his first choice to wed. Unfortunately, for all of them, Catherine's sister had died young, drowning in a sailing accident off the Cape 2 weeks before the ceremony and leaving Catherine an inescapable legacy. In Rachel, Alistair would always have his 18-year-old raven-haired bride. She would always be beautiful, never grow old, never be anything but perfect in his memories. And the most important thing of all, she would always be beyond his reach, ensuring that Alistair would always pine for her. Catherine realized all of this much too late, of course. As a young bride herself, she'd never considered what drove men like Alistair and what bored them. Things might have been different if only she had understood what to withhold from her husband to keep him interested. But these days, Catherine was too tired to even try with Alistair anymore. Ever since Sheridan's birth, the complications, the hemorrhaging, doctors couldn't help her, just said her body had been weak and that she never quite recovered. Bed rest and lots of it had been her life for 2 years now, but she felt like things would change for her. Someday soon she'd get her health back, her strength back. Catherine wanted to protest again to her husband, get him to admit it was wrong to spy on their son. But his iron cold look killed the words in her throat. And as she had so many times before, she simply slipped away. Alistair watched his wife leave, but his mind was not on Catherine or her concerns about spying on Julian. Catherine was naive, but then what could one expect from a woman? No, Alistair's mind was still on his son, and the unsettling news that he had taken a woman of color to a Bermuda bridal suite. My God, thought Alistair, even the chance that Julian would marry such a woman made his flesh grow cold. His firstborn will become a social outcast in their circles. And how could Julian inherit and run Crane Industries when he had not properly developed either the social or business contacts to do the job? The modern marketplace and world economy were never more unpredictable, and Alistair knew it would take a great deal of vigilance to successfully maintain the family's fortune. Vigilance and, when necessary, ruthlessness. Alistair learned that from his father as well. No, this affair could not be permitted. And yet, Julian was a grown man now. Alistair had to be very careful in how he chose to influence his son. There was no room for error. The strategy must be foolproof. And it wouldn't hurt to kill two birds with one stone, thought Alistair. After mulling it over for a solid hour, Alistair picked up the phone and called an old friend and business rival, Governor Harrison Winthrop. Harrison? Alistair, how's Helen? Good, good. And what about that lovely daughter of yours, Ivy? She's in college now, isn't she? Damn, that was chapter 4. Chapter 5 is Ivy. Makes me feel like Eve Russell. I'm sorry. I actually don't remember her maiden name. But Eve could have loved him. And he could have loved her. And that sucks. And that was the end of chapter 4. It made me want to aggressively eat those pieces of bagels. And my wine is so far away. I'm gonna go get it. And I'm gonna read chapter 5. I think. Oh, that's what I keep forgetting to do. Check my email. Well, I have two. Gmail and Yahoo. Dude, is that TV show still playing? Fuck. I guess I forgot to stop it. It's fucking upsetting. Fuck. Ouch. Pardon me. Okay. Oh shit, dude. I wanna like get my crap. I bought this. Did I send it to the right address? Fuck! I didn't. I'm gonna kick this phone's ass, dog. Is this serious? What? You wanna get stamps on what? Please, please stop playing with me. What the fuck did I even just order? I didn't just order something. What the fuck? Dude. Dude. It says the right address. Did I order something fucking else? Cause like I thought that I fucking didn't. This girl wants to come over and watch scary movies. And I want to hold her while watching scary movies. Oh, that's the right address, right? God, that scared the crap out of me, dog. I don't think they're gonna send that until I pay that shit. Fucking scared the shit out of me, though. And I really want this shit to ship. I want it now. I want it now so bad. It's like they really are gonna make me wait 2 weeks. Ugh. Alright, sorry. It's like I'm making you wait 2 weeks to fucking blah. Okay, but like, yeah, should be Gucci. Did this shit just go down in price? I don't know, dude, but I really like that. I want to try that. And I don't want to ship it here anymore. Like, that's my address. Gosh. Okay, and then. Oh my gosh, I'm being so weird. It's because I don't usually talk to girls. Even though I don't want to talk about that. All right, let's do this. Chapter 5, Ivy. This sucks. I might need a cigarette for this. set my hair on fire a little bit. Again, it's hard not to do that when you're braiding your hair. You know about that. Oh, I got one time. It's super cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to disrespect that like that. Okay, we're like, how did they do that really? That evening, just outside of Harmony, flurries began to fall, dusting the moonlit grounds of Rutland Women's College with a layer of silvery white. Glancing back to make sure no one was following her, Ivy Winthrop darted off the well-lit sidewalk that led to the college's library and crunched through the shadows of the snow-covered lawn. The back drive was slippery when she reached it, and Ivy nearly lost her footing as she walked to its end, where a locked gate was supposed to separate the young women of this exclusive school from the world that lay beyond it. Brushing back a stray lock of curling white blonde hair, she peered through the bars and saw the rusting Pinto with the Harmony Pizza Shop logo spray painted on its side. For a moment, she couldn't stop herself from cringing at the pathetic little vehicle. But when she moved closer to the locked gate and saw Sam Bennett's dazzling smile shining at her from behind the windshield, her legs went as shaky as the first time she'd seen him bare-chested on Harmony's shoreline almost 2 years before. It was always like this for Ivy. Sam made her whole world disappear. With all of its demands and expectations, he drew her magically into a perfect cocoon of romance. As she gazed now at his handsome, square-jawed face, a flood of cherished memories washed over her. Starlit summer nights making love on Harmony's beach, the waves lapping close in a sensual rhythm, fall picnics on horseback, gazing at the turning trees, kissing for hours on a blanket of fallen leaves, winter getaways to his father's rustic fishing cabin, moonlit snow framing the glistening ice of the mountain lake. That's where they were heading tonight for their special Valentine's Day, to that tiny one-room log cabin in the woods just west of Harmony, where Ivy could shut out the rest of her world and Sam's hard body would make love to her for hours on that soft fur rug by the crackling fire. Whew. Suddenly, Ivy blinked her sky blue eyes and willed herself to remember where she was and how careful she needed to be. Warily, she looked behind her, making sure yet again that no one from the college was watching her slip through the bars of the back gate. She could almost hear the nasty laughter from the girls of Alpha, 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 the most exclusive sorority in the country. Every last one of them would be wildly amused at the sight of her climbing inside Sam's sorry little car. For an awful moment, Ivy relived the tricky ordeal it took to get here. 15 endless minutes that began with 3 little words. Valentine's Day sucks. The words had reverberated like Greek thunder through Alpha's campus home, rising up the curving marble staircase and striking Ivy's delicate diamond-studded ears with irritating force. A vulgar pronouncement, Ivy had thought upon hearing it, from an even more vulgar girl. Ivy's one goal this evening had been to flee through Alpha House's ridiculously ostentatious stone foyer, impossible to heat properly during the New England winters, and slip free of Rutland's high stone walls without being grilled like a war criminal. This, Ivy knew, was an unlikely prospect now that the raven-haired terror by the name of Clarissa Morton had come tramping through the great arched doorway below, stomping slush off her Australian-made snow boots with the delicacy of a Nazi stormtrooper. I mean it. I hate V-Day, Clarissa continued to rant. All that forced sentimentality, drugstores full of cheap perfume and candy hearts, the entire freaking idea of sending Valentines was cooked up by some cretin on Madison Avenue. To Ivy, whose father had once served as a governor of the state and counted the Kennedy and Crane families among his prestigious list of acquaintances, it seemed that Clarissa had a lot in common with her statements. She was rude, tacky, and tolerated in Ivy's social sphere only because an international food conglomerate had bought her parents' silly little ice cream company with stock options that had split 10 times in 3 years. As a result, Clarissa had built this drafty rendition of an English manor for Alpha's housing needs the very year she had pledged. Now a senior at Rutland, Clarissa, an exotic looking girl with a flowing mane of black curls and piercing green eyes, was also the head of this year's membership selection committee. Greek thunder described her pronouncements to a T. I just want to get to my Sam, Ivy silently lamented. But the only path to her secret boyfriend was down Alpha's marble stairway and through its great oak doors, now effectively guarded by Clarissa and Rebecca Osborne, who had just joined Clarissa's snow-begone clogging dance. Rebecca was a girlhood friend of Ivy's, but she was also a slippery little freshman pledge, ready to do or say anything to finally be accepted as an alpha girl. You're so right, Clarissa. I never liked Valentine's Day, lied Rebecca nervously, twirling a strand of her strawberry blonde hair. Makes you feel like you're a leper or something if you don't have a date. A date, shrieked Clarissa. Nobody has dates anymore. Get this through your head, will you, Rebecca? Happy Days is not a television show. It's historical fiction. I mean, for God's sake, how did you get your head stuck in 1950s sand? Rebecca's wide blue eyes blinked rapidly in a state of obvious panic. I blame my parents, she cowered quickly. I mean, they think like that, not me. Well, I don't think like that, said Clarissa. When Johnny and I get it on, it's good, straight sex. Johnny was, of course, Jonathan Hotchkiss, Clarissa's half English boyfriend. Yet another reason the Alphas were so impressed with her. Hotchkiss, although born near Harmony, was the nephew of a bona fide English earl. He was now finishing up his last year of higher education across the Atlantic at Oxford. Jonathan claimed Clarissa was cheeky and colorful, but Ivy had heard some gossip that suggested his family's aging dynasty was strapped for cold, hard cash, and they'd put up with anything, even a vulgar, badly bred American in law, to gain solvency. I say screw sentimentality, Clarissa continued to advise Rebecca. Haven't you read that new Erica Jong book yet? She's sort of pornographic, isn't she? Rebecca, you are so out of it. Come in my room and I'll lend you my copy. Ivy sighed in disgust. Although she'd never say so out loud, her views on sex were far different from Clarissa's. Ivy well knew that the hip and fashionable trend these days was to trash romance. But for Ivy, sentimentality was a wonderful thing. In fact, she had guarded her virginity until she found a boy who truly loved her and whom she truly loved in return. Having sex and making love were two very different acts in Ivy's mind, and she had vowed to never have sex or marry for any reason other than love, although sometimes Ivy secretly wondered if her mother would agree. Your father is a good man, Ivy's mother often told her, but Ivy never once recalled hearing her mother talk about loving him. Ivy's mother, Helena Revere Mott Beaton Winthrop, was a straight-laced DAR and a well-bred woman of taste and intelligence. Her family, which was distantly related to the Revolutionary War equestrian Paul Revere, once boasted a fabulous fortune and friendships with the likes of Franklin Roosevelt, Scott Fitzgerald, and the Duke of York. Unfortunately for Ivy's mother, much of her family's money was lost in a single hand of Monte Carlo baccarat. Romantically enough, or tragically, depending on how you look at it, the wager had been placed by Helen's uncle a week before his wedding to impress a breathtakingly beautiful Danish countess he had just met. After a passing fancy had fleeced the Revere Mott Beatons of their fortune, the family limped along on credit for a few years. Then Ivy got the distinct impression that her mother, a natural bombshell with lavender eyes and flowing white blonde hair, had been sold to the highest bidder. We have a Martimi. The Martimi says, DAR, of course, refers to the Daughters of the American Revolution, a group that actually rejected Tabby's membership application. I just can't understand it, Tabby wrote in her diary. I told them there was no need to produce a relative who lived during the revolution when I saw the whole thing myself. It's not that her mother had ever expressed unhappiness at marrying the heir to the Winthrop Marine shipping fleet. Ivy's father, Harrison, was a charming man. Of course, his fortune couldn't be compared to the hundreds of millions controlled by the Cranes, but Harrison Winthrop did have nearly 10 million to his name in addition to his fleet of ships, and he had distinguished himself by holding the office of governor for 2 terms during Ivy's childhood. Still, it seemed to Ivy that some days her mother would stare off into thin air, a wistful look on her face. Maybe it was just Ivy's childish imagination, but she could not shake the feeling that her mother was daydreaming about another life, an alternate life, a life she would have lived if her uncle hadn't been quite so drunk on champagne at a Monte Carlo card table in 1952. Hi, Ivy, where are you going? The voice of Rebecca Osborne startled Ivy back to the present, instantly reminding Ivy of her secret Valentine's night date. Sam Bennett's lantern jaw, granite body, and tenderly passionate kisses were almost within reach. Just stepping out, said Ivy breezily, trying to slip by. But it's so late, said Rebecca, appearing concerned. Not for the library, Ivy lied smoothly, an art she learned well over the last 2 years of seeing Sam. It's open all night. The library? Clarissa's eyebrow lifted and her critical gaze settled on Ivy's fur-lined cream-colored coat and matching silk and cashmere scarf, which Ivy had strategically selected with her mother at Saks to make her long, silky blonde curls appear angelic. Look, Rebecca, our little Ivy has magically transformed from a social butterfly to dreary bookworm. Can you believe it? I can't. Just be careful out there, Rebecca warned. There's some peace to the delivery car at the back gate. Whoever the driver is, he's been parked there an awful long time. Ivy's heart nearly stopped when Clarissa cast a knowing gaze at Ivy and said, Don't be so paranoid, Rebecca. The delivery guy's probably hoping he can score some action since we're overloaded with estrogen around here. I'd even let him service me if it weren't beneath me. Ivy's kid glove stilled on the latch of the half-open door. Her face flinching from the typical bite of New England chill against her better judgment, she answered back. You know, Clarissa, my mother always said that some people can amass all the money in the world, but no matter how many replicas of English manor halls they build, it still won't buy them class. Behind Clarissa, Rebecca's eyes widened in shock as her mouth went slack. Nobody insulted Clarissa, not to her face. But Ivy stood her ground, trying not to look completely unnerved as Clarissa's thin lips pursed and her green eyes narrowed. Why defend some silly pizza boy, Winthrop? Clarissa finally replied in a voice as chilly as the drafty rooms of the ostentatious hall she'd built. After all, don't you feel the same way? No self-respecting alpha girl would waste time with a towny loser. Ivy was speechless for a moment. She hadn't expected Clarissa to zero in so sharply on the truth. If you're feeling the itch, continued Clarissa, there are plenty of Harvard and Yale men who come sniffing around our weekend parties. We have standards to maintain. It would disgrace the sorority to stoop any lower. And if you don't agree, maybe you ought to rethink pledging alpha. Ivy bit her bottom lip. She hated to admit it, but if Clarissa could prove Ivy's destination tonight, she could easily sink her final acceptance into the exclusive sorority. An inconceivable disgrace for Ivy, with every last one of her friends pledging. Dropping out was no option either. Her father had refused to release control of her $1 million trust fund until she completed a 4-year degree. Ivy had no choice but to imprison herself within these vine-covered stone walls. And enduring Rutland prison for 4 years would be tolerable only as an alpha girl. Besides, Ivy had to admit that her beloved grandmother would be so devastated if Alpha dumped her. The Winthrop women had all been alpha girls since before the First World War. Don't push it, thought Ivy, eyeing Clarissa's sour gaze. Just bolt. Well, I really must get to the library, sang Ivy, whisking into the night, before Clarissa even knew the conversation was over. That was chapter 4, ending. And the next video will be of chapter 5, Hidden Passions. The Secret Diaries of Tabitha Lennox. She hasn't even begun to stir up trouble yet, but from what we've read, we know that she's got a vendetta against every family, and we're introducing every family. We know what the Cranes are responsible for, vaguely or generally. Um, we know that Julian has a thing for Eve, and Alistair doesn't like it. Catherine can't stand up for herself. Sheridan must be an angel baby because she was a very difficult pregnancy. And shit, man, Ivy's in love with Sam, but she has to keep her reputation up. And I'm glad she left, but that could pose to be a problem if she stands him up. She could lose him, and losing him, or the love of your life, well, that's an unsettled debt that never goes away, now isn't it? Look at my glasses. There's a cricket. I'll be back.